for our listeners out there, understanding your type of work is critical. You could use these categories of evergreen, planned, opportunistic, fire drills, sure, or create your own. But man, just at the base level, I think if people more understand the type of work they're doing, it's going to give them the decision matrix to say when to say yes, when to say no, when you need to shift gears, what you can do less of, what you need to do more of.
Welcome to the Culture Goodr podcast, a behind-the-shades look at creating and changing culture inside of Goodr sunglasses.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Culture Goodr podcast. Today, we're going to talk about the value of understanding the different types of work your team does. So, Stephen, what are the 4 categories of work we do, and how do those come to be?
What's up, y'all? Shaun, well, as you know, we have 4 types of work at Goodr, and this is a new revelation. We realize we have, there's 4 categories. It's evergreen work, planned work, opportunistic work, and fire drills. And to kind of drill deeper in each one, evergreen work, this is the day-to-day continuous processes that require that we need to keep going to keep thriving. They can make up, the wild thing is they make up 50 to 80% of your role. It depends on your role. It depends on the year. It depends what our focus is. Then next type of work is planned work. These are annual. We identify projects, initiatives, and we directly tie work to them. These necessarily do not roll over year to year. They might eventually become evergreen, but they don't have to. And this is the wild thing about this. Again, depending on your role, this could be 20 to 50% of your role. Then there's opportunistic work. These are unplanned initiatives that come up that we get to do. I think that's a really important thing to understand. Giant partner reaches out. We need to turn around an initiative really fast. Okay, does this speak to our focus? Great, it's opportunistic. We get to do it. Let's do it. And then the last one, which is fire drills, unplanned initiatives. And it's important to acknowledge every company that you just do have a certain amount of fire drills. And the reality is when you have a fire drill, you need to do these. And ideally, this bandwidth is getting taken from planned work and opportunistic work, not evergreen, because we've established evergreen is the core function of our business. So those are our 4 categories of work. And how it came to be was a leadership summit. We were working on our vision 3-2-1, which we've talked about on this podcast. That's like the 3 focuses of each team. And when we did this, we kind of had this realization that Vision 3-2-1 was great when we rolled it out, but it necessarily wasn't functioning the way we needed it to anymore. And as we kind of started digging deeper, it was really focused. Vision 3-2-1 was really focused in either kind of like the now what we call planned or opportunistic work. We were setting up initiatives and we weren't accounting for the evergreen, the core day-to-day projects initiatives inside of our business. And so that led to, we need to account for evergreen work. Then that led to us defining evergreen work. Then that led to us realizing it's not just evergreen. There's 4 categories. It's evergreen, planned, opportunistic, and fire drills. And then it led to us creating an entire point of view on this and really digging into us understanding our types of work and who does what type and when.
Yeah. So it's one of those things where the curse of knowledge, right? Once you learn to read, you can't not do it. Now that we're aware of these categories, it's almost like impossible not to see work in terms of those categories, right? Whereas before it was just like, I got to do this and that and, keep the baseline going, keep the plates spinning.
You know what's wild is as soon as we realized this on a Tuesday working session, then Wednesday, Hannah and Rachel strategic initiatives went away and they kind of worked on it. Then we met back as a group on Thursday, kind of uncovered all the stuff that I just talked about. And then that very next Tuesday, I went to TWC, which is our all staff meeting, and did a talk called Creating Space, to go to space. Everybody, we just use fucking space analogies. But the reason why was because, to your point, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And just getting on stage and walking everybody through this realization and how we're going to shift our focuses and how we account for our work and how we account for green lighting initiatives is changing. Man, I would say that did 80% of the work just in a realization of yes, everybody now sees it, and we're all working it together. So yeah, I mean, just that handing that piece of knowledge over to the company quickly has done a significant lift, wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think it speaks to the value of a framework, right? When you're able to categorize something in this way and then share that and spread it throughout the whole company, everyone can think about it in that same way. And the value is like you say, 80% of the value is already there. And then it's just up to time to work it through.
Yes. And it also giving yourself the ability to have nuance, understanding that some roles are 80% evergreen, some roles are 80% planned. There's a magic in that. And when we worked as a team, we really identified, hey, this is fluid. It is a framework, not a rigid set of rules. It's for us to understand. And then I think just nailing down on those two, and then the other two, which are, you can only say yes to things if they speak to our core focus. And when something's a fire drill, it's a fire drill. We need to back out work in other places.
Right. So that allows a negotiation to happen, right? Rather than the superhero mode of like, okay, I'll just do this and everything else I was supposed to do. It's like, okay, this is going to take the place of that.
Yeah, negotiation. Also, I always hope too that we are not, it allows us to say either fuck yes or fuck no.
Yeah, a means of making decisions, right?
Yeah, for sure. Because when fire drills actually are usually pretty easy to identify, right? The door on the loading dock breaks. Well, yeah, you got to fix that now.
Yeah.
I think that the opportunistic gets really interesting, and because we're a company that does great things all the time, and everybody wants to say yes, and that's kind of the magic of understanding. Like, all right, allowing that to say no so that people can focus on the stuff that we already agreed upon.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Because there are so many. It's like you're gonna get shiny object syndrome, right?
Yeah, and we said this off mic, but I do wonder how many brands are actually just kind of conceptualizing the type of work their company does, their team does, and they can have, you could create your own categories, but this has set us free, and we'll just make it better as we go.
Yeah, definitely. One thing that, I mean, obviously it came up in this working session, right? The fact that most of the things in our plans sort of ignored the baseline, right? The like, well, this is what we've hired you to do, and you're expected to keep doing that, and here is what we want you to focus on. How did that conversation kind of shift the way that you were thinking about, oh, the baseline the baseline is important to include as a part of our plan?
I think that when you are a young company, we're in our 10th year, still young-ish. I mean, not like we're not 3 years old anymore, but
right.
When you're a younger company, when you're growing really fast, there is a shiny object syndrome. You are also just doing whatever needs to be done, but we've like matured to another level of saying, well, yeah, but we've created a core set of things we're really, really good at and we need, and we've created that, so let's acknowledge it. And every year, every team picks their focuses in Vision 3-2-1. That speaks to the brand focus. And I think the thing that we uncovered is, man, if you're on learning and development, Shaun, and one of the main things your team's in charge of is onboarding. Well, as a brand, our focus is operation, is customer connection. So how do we create a deeper connection with our customers? That's what we're focusing on as a company. And this realization of, but the people teams, like, they support everybody. And although this focus is not inside the bailiwick, that's quite irrelevant, because the core function of their work is supporting us so that we can focus on the customer. And I think that's kind of the maybe understanding the layering of that, where not every team always is going to feed up in the right way. It should feed up, but it doesn't have to directly be related. It doesn't have to be a new thing.
Right. Yeah. And as you're saying that, I'm realizing a lot of this is kind of catching up to where we are, right? Like the mindsets you always say, like what served us in 2020 didn't serve us in 2021, 22, 23, right? The willingness to change and leave behind something that got you here, realizing it's not going to get us to the next place, or it requires just a little pivot, right? And so this represents a shift in the way that we approach our work, from like, hey, we just need anyone to do kind of whatever, to like, oh, some of these roles are going to be pretty consistent actually, and others are going to be a little bit more firefighty, but we can start to specialize, and we can start to plan to include all of them within our scope.
Yeah, and right, there's a value of understanding your work. There's also value of getting changing things very quickly in here. There's a huge value of we did an episode on our vision 3-2-1 and how every year as a company we pick a focus, which is customer connection. And we still have our vision, but what we realized in this too was everybody had 3 focuses. And Rach asked the question at our offsite, which was, well, why does it have to be 3? And the answer is it doesn't. And you realize, like, well, sometimes it might be 1, might be 2. That right now we have 4 initiatives that are going into it. So I think that's another thing too. The framework was really, really good at the time, and then as we kind of grow and mature, you realize, well, we were actually, it wasn't helping us anymore; it was hurting us.
And the funny thing about that is, the framework has places for things, right? Literally the slides, the way that we would fill them out, there's 3 spots. So it's like, why does there have to be 3? And it's kind of like, well, because there's 3 spots on the slide, right? It's like, is that the most helpful? Maybe not. So allowing the flexibility to redesign even the thing that's helping you look at your work can help provide a fresh take on it.
Yeah, and I think something else that came out of this working session was a new brief and kind of like our project point of view. Which was, we want to relook at all of our projects and create systems based on trust, not micromanaging. And so for our listeners out there, we are a company we have rigid process. And I believe in process as a person. I think, you just brush your teeth every day. That's how you have a clean mouth. And there are certain processes that are really important. And we have thrived, I think, largely because we are good at process. We are good at organization, productivity, project management, ... But we're at such a large size now where the reality is there are core processes that you always have. And this isn't getting away from process, but it is saying, hey, how do we make a system that encourages like ownership and efficiency and allows for space and creative problem solving? Because if all you are focused on is process and checking boxes, you're not thinking. Right? If everybody's thinking the same, nobody's thinking. Another part of this is curating a system that shows evergreen work and new work kind of in the same breath. That was part of this. And these kind of things together really, I know this is kind of part of the same stew that led to us identifying this. But I just got to call that out, because that is something that is a bigger shift in this. Because in going into these 4 categories of work, the reality is the gray area is okay. And, inevitably, I think some companies might not want to do this because they're worried that somebody's going to say, oh, well, I can't do that fire drill because I have this evergreen work. It's like, well, that person's just an asshole. Like, I mean, right? Like that's in this talk, what it is about coaching the gray area. And it's okay to live in the gray area. This isn't, you're not trying to account for every second of every day with every type of work. You're just trying to generally understand the categories and the scope of your role.
Yeah, definitely. There was something that you just brought up in there that I think is really important, because there can be, especially, the more engineering kind of thought you apply to something, the more you want to manufacture something that engineers out uncertainty, right? And that tends to create really rigid systems and processes, which create consistency, reduce the variability in the outputs and all that. But then, like you say, it kind of leads to like a just checking the boxes mindset, right? Did I do the thing that I'm supposed to do? And it detaches the sense of like autonomy and vision toward a purpose from the task and the thing that I'm doing. So can you talk a little bit about that kind of thinking and how this helps to promote autonomy and direction?
Yeah, and I would even say, man, maybe the most important thing is creative problem solving. Because when you have such rigid process, you're looking and you have blinders on.
Yeah.
And really at our size and where we're going, I mean, I think we all have a deep need to be creative. And something I believe into my core, creative is not painting, that's painting. The best accountants in the world. Yeah, painting is painting.
Right.
The best accountants in the world are super creative people. The best salespeople in the world are very creative people. The best ops people in the world, best content, so on and so forth. I think real creativity, you can get it in little bits if you are at a dead sprint, but you really need to have a certain amount of space, I think, to kind of like open that up. I think this is really important for creating space, and I think that what I think about a lot is, man, yesterday I had a giant budget meeting with a bunch of people presenting, and I purposely did not create a template. It was like, hey, here's what you're presenting on. Here's the one thing it has to be in there, and let it unfold. And what I realized is where kind of everybody took it. It was off menu. It's like we're having, it was like in and out animal style. I'm like, well, I purposely didn't create a template for this. I wanted to hand over the autonomy and say, this is my expectation. Here's why we're doing this. And what came back was better than I could have imagined. It was leaders at this company telling me things that I'm not asking for, right? It was off menu. It was fucking incredible. But you need this. You need autonomy. You need some general rules. You need accountability. You can't just say, hey, we have 4 categories of work. Pow. You need, you do need to have a lot of systems and training along the way to get to this point.
Yeah, right. Definitely. Okay. So just to fit that in real quick, but then I want to circle back on it. So what kind of work did you just hand over to someone in that moment when you're saying, hey, we got this presentation. Here's this thing I'm looking for. Go ham.
Oh, that's a great question. This, I would say, this is evergreen work that needed two things. We needed to create accountability and visibility to it. So I'm like, a version of this work's being done, but we're not sharing it in the appropriate way. And then number 2, this is evergreen work that we need to be doing better. And that was really like, hey, these are core functions of our business. We don't have markers in place to understand it. So, I mean, high level, the second Thursday of every month, a group of people get together and do a monthly recap from the month before, really rooted. It's business intelligence. It's our marketing teams, really rooted in, all right, the previous month, our sales, and then the fourth Thursday of the month, which is what just happened, is I'm like, well, if we're looking at how we made money, I want us to look how we're spending our money, and we have 4 big categories here, and I asked for an analysis, and so yeah, but it's evergreen work that was not being shared in the appropriate way, and we need to be doing better.
Okay, cool. All right, and then you were speaking to the value of creating trust, right? So in this case, when you put forward a project, you basically said, here's what I need from it, and then created a sense of like, there is no failure or success here. I just want to find out what you want to put forward, right? So you just created an open space saying, I don't know, which means I now have the possibility to find out. And then you were kind of blown away by what you saw.
Yeah. And then it allowed us to say, okay, well, let's do this again next month. And now we know it's possible. Now we know, here's where we started, but now it's possible.
Yeah, right. And then some of those things are going to lead to consistently great insights, right? And that kind of thing might get turned into a process.
Yeah, and I think the hard part about the evergreen work idea is that it is very similar to brushing your teeth or mowing your lawn. You kind of just always have to do it. And so, I mean, I understand why people jump to opportunistic work and, have like that shiny object syndrome. The work here is, how do people understand the big picture? How do they connect their evergreen tasks to that big picture? And then how are we actually allowing people to innovate and change? And because that is the real thing too, is anybody, if you're doing the exact same thing over and over again, you're going to be bored to death. And I think the fun thing about our culture is even on something like an evergreen task, there's the core of it that needs to be done, but how and it evolves is equally important to understand.
Yeah, definitely. And the mindset that you've created for us, or the lens or framework we can use, is how do we go from typical to remarkable, right?
Yes, over and over again.
Totally. A lot of the time, the typical is broken by remarkable, and then remarkable becomes typical again, and then you have to step back and look at it and go, okay, how do we do that same motion over and over again?
And yeah, I think what's really fun is that anytime it's happened to me very recently where I'm like, oh man, well, this has become typical. I thought at one point this was remarkable. Now this has become typical, so we need to change it. I think, I don't know, for our listeners out there, understanding your type of work is critical. You could use these categories of evergreen, planned, opportunistic, fire drills, sure, or create your own. But man, just at the base level, I think if people more understand the type of work they're doing, it's going to give them the decision matrix to say when to say yes, when to say no, when you need to shift gears, what you can do less of, what you need to do more of.
Yeah. So let's say I'm listening and I'm like, man, as I think about my job daily, I would love to have time and space for evergreen work, but it ends up being just fire drills all day. So how does this kind of framework help someone in that position realign the way that they're spending their energy?
Well, I would first ask, are you sure your job is not supposed to be fire drills all day? Because if you're an ER doctor, my assumption your job is fire drills all day.
That's fire drills.
Yeah, and so I would want to ask a bunch of questions. Okay, can we agree that your job shouldn't be this, or can we agree that it is? And I think I would start there to understand that, and then I don't know, go in. I mean, really, that simple exercise, I wasn't prepared for, like, thinking about how I would. Simple exercise, if I was to do it just personally, I would just look back at the last 6 months of my calendar, because I calendar block everything, and be like, okay, where am I spending time? Where is it continuous stuff that I do over and over again? Great. Do I believe I should be doing that? Is that serving me and the brand? Okay, if so, that's evergreen work. Then what is the planned work that is new, initiatives, has an end date, and what is, like, where's the stuff I said yes to, maybe I shouldn't have,
right?
Or
where
I said
can
yes,
you free up space, right?
Where can you free up space, and then acknowledging, like, okay, whatever, a CEO of the company, there's an element it's hard to predict, but there is a certain element of fire drills that I accept, and so that's how kind of I would coach anybody to do it. Just kind of look back at your past 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months and start understanding it.
Oh, that's great. And what I love about that is it creates an opportunity for alignment, even within yourself, right? If you're doing all your work with this internal feeling of like, I should be doing this other thing, but I just keep doing this stuff instead. And then you realize, like, no, this stuff is actually my job.
Yeah.
And this other stuff is planned work that I just need to plan for or whatever, right? Like, it allows you to free yourself to align totally with what really is working for how you're spending your time and energy.
100%.
Yeah. Nice. So there's got to be, that is one potential obstacle, right, to doing this kind of thing. What are some of the other things that might hold people back, or either inside goodr or that you can imagine outside the organization, from getting value from this kind of a framework?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of times you need to have a version of top-down leadership, so you can just do it inside your team. So if you're leading a team, you can do it inside your team. I think it would be hard to push this up, and so as a person, you could just do it and understand it. As an individual contributor, if you run a small team, you could do this inside of your team. So I would say understanding that, and don't even burn the energy trying to push it up. Just do it really, really good until one day somebody asks you about it, and then you can explain the concept.
Right.
So I would say the obstacle would be thinking you need to get somebody's approval, or think you actually just start doing this. Yeah, that's a repeat.
Yeah, totally. Oh, I think that's great.
All right, sir. Anything else we want to hit here?
Yeah, there's this was a big mindset shift for us, right? As a company, like you can't see it until you see it. Now you see it, you can't unsee it. What are some of the other mindset shifts that are supportive to using this kind of a framework to analyze and, divvy up your energy?
Yeah, I think that, well, when you're saying yes to something, what are you saying no to, right? If you fully understand this, then you got to understand that concept. Saying no is hard. I think part of this whole idea of having people think and have autonomy, creative problem solving, you might ask, is like a lot less like long slacks and a lot more conversations with people. It's always good to talk to people.
Sure.
And less like, oh, I have too many meetings or I can't do this. More, hey, I'm focused on this right now for this reason. I can do this. So that there's an ownership piece that is beautiful to it, that actually it should serve as a tool to anybody, whether it's you or me, to say, I'm focusing on this. If you would like me to focus on this, that's okay. We didn't agree on that. That's okay. What would you like to come off the plate?
Yeah. So like a chance for real communication to occur instead of just like what feels like a brush off, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Cool. Anything else?
I don't know. I think we touched on pretty much everything. And, this is all at the service of just understanding the big picture, getting 160 people moving in the same direction. Probably the hardest part of my job. And so that's what this is all in service of, the brand.
Yeah, most definitely. Okay. Well, so just to put a bow on it, like what advice, if you can sum this all up and just kind of hand it over to someone, what advice do you give to help folks create more space for themselves or for their teams?
Yeah, I mean, you would go through, well, at the core, don't fall into sunk cost fallacy. If something's not working, get rid of it. Number one. Number two, understanding the categories of your work. There is nuance there. So, we have our 4, again, evergreen, planned, opportunistic, fire drills. You can create however many you want, but understand them and understand there's nuance. Because if you try and be too rigid, you're just falling back to what started this for us. And 3, the gray area is all right. Evolve it as you go. You should always be evolving everything as a leader, as a person, as a leader of a small company, a big company, a team. Your job should be to be a scientist and create a hypothesis, test it, and evolve it to see if it works.
Beautiful. I love it. All right. Well, thanks, Stephen. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Until next time, be excellent to each other.